Waitress serves bikers and sees note on the check. What happens next leaves her in tears. It was another quiet Tuesday evening at Rosie's Diner, a cozy roadside spot nestled just off the highway. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink. Inside, the warm glow of neon signs reflected off the chrome tables, while the faint hum of an old jukebox filled the air. Clara wiped down a counter with the precision born of routine. For 5 years, she'd worked at Rosie's, and though the hours were long, the work had a comforting rhythm. Tonight, however, something felt different. The first sign was the rumble. A low, guttural growl that grew louder as it neared. Clara glanced out the window, her brow furrowing. The sound wasn't a car, it was the unmistakable roar of motorcycles. Within moments they appeared, a group of 6 riders clad in leather jackets, their bikes gleaming under the diner's fluorescent lights. "Looks like we've got company," muttered Doris, the cook, peeking out from the kitchen. Her voice carried a hint of unease. Clara forced a smile. "It's just bikers. Probably passing through." But she couldn't deny the nervous flutter in her chest. The bikers entered, their presence commanding the room. They were a motley crew, men and women of varying ages, their faces weathered by years on the road. Their leader, a tall man with a salt and pepper beard, scanned the diner with sharp eyes. Despite their intimidating appearance, they weren't loud or rowdy. They moved with quiet purpose, claiming a booth near the back. Clara approached with her notepad in hand, her heart pounding slightly harder than usual. "Good evening," she greeted, her voice steady. "What can I get for you?" The leader glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Coffee. Black. For all of us." Clara nodded and jotted it down. "Anything else?" "Not yet," he replied, his tone curt but not unfriendly. She hurried to the counter to fill their order. Behind her, the hum of conversation picked up as the few other diners speculated about the bikers. Clara tried to ignore it, focusing instead on steadying her hands as she carried the tray to their table. As she set down the cups, she noticed something peculiar. One of the bikers, a woman with streaks of silver in her dark hair, was staring at her intently. It wasn't a hostile look, more curious, as if she were trying to place Clara's face. "Here you go," Clara said, her voice tinged with politeness. The woman didn't respond, but her gaze lingered a moment longer before she turned her attention to her coffee. The night wore on, and the bikers remained quiet, speaking in low tones. Clara couldn't shake the feeling that they were watching her. Not in an overt way, but there was a certain awareness in their glances, as if they were assessing her. She told herself it was her imagination. They were just travelers, passing through like so many others. Still, unease prickled at the edges of her mind. It was when the door jingled again that the atmosphere shifted. A man walked in, tall, wiry, and with a cocky swagger. Clara recognized him instantly. Tommy Griggs, a local troublemaker who seemed to thrive on making others uncomfortable. He'd been kicked out of the diner once before for harassing another waitress, and his presence now set Clara on edge. Tommy's eyes lit up when he saw her. "Well, if it isn't little Clara," he drawled, sauntering over to the counter. "How's my favorite girl?" "What do you want, Tommy?" Clara asked, keeping her tone neutral. "Just a cup of coffee," he said, leaning closer than necessary. "And maybe a smile. You know, for old time's sake." Clara's stomach churned. She stepped back, putting some distance between them. "I'll get your coffee." Tommy smirked, clearly enjoying her discomfort. As she turned to pour his coffee, she noticed the bikers watching the interaction. The leader's expression had hardened, and the silver-haired woman's eyes were narrowed. Clara brought Tommy his coffee, but he wasn't content to leave it at that. He lingered, making obnoxious comments and attempting to flirt, his voice carrying across the room. Clara's attempts to deflect him only seemed to embolden him further. "Why don't you sit down and have a chat with me?" Tommy said, grabbing her wrist as she tried to walk away. Before she could react, a shadow loomed over them. It was the leader of the bikers, his presence imposing. "Let her go," he said, his voice calm but laced with steel. Tommy sneered. And who are you to tell me what to do? The biker didn't flinch. Someone who doesn't like seeing women harassed. Let her go. Tommy hesitated, clearly weighing his options. The other bikers had risen from their seats, their expressions grim. Outnumbered and outmatched, Tommy released Clara's wrist and muttered something under his breath before storming out. Clara exhaled shakily, her pulse racing. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The biker nodded. No one should have to put up with that. As the night wore on, the tension gradually eased. The bikers stayed until closing time, their demeanor more relaxed now. When Clara brought them the bill, the leader handed her a neatly folded stack of bills. "Keep the change," he said. Clara's eyes widened with tears when she unfolded the bills. It was far more than their meal cost, enough to cover her rent for the month. Before she could thank them, the leader spoke again. "You've got a lot of strength, kid," he said, his tone softer now. "But don't let people like him push you around. If he comes back, you let us know." With that, the bikers filed out, their departure as quiet as their arrival. Clara stood by the window, watching their taillights fade into the night. She clutched the money in her hands, a strange mix of gratitude and confusion swirling in her chest. Who were these bikers, and why did they seem to care so much about her? She didn't know it yet, but their intervention was only the beginning of a series of events that would change her life forever. The next morning, Clara arrived at the diner earlier than usual. The previous night lingered in her thoughts, the biker's mysterious kindness swirling alongside Tommy's unwelcome presence. As she prepped the counter, she noticed something unusual on the corkboard by the door. Among the community announcements and faded posters was a fresh piece of paper. It was neatly folded, with her name written in bold black ink. Clara frowned and pulled it down. Unfolding it, she found a short note. "Watch your back. Not everyone means well. A friend." Her chest tightened. Was this a warning about Tommy? Or someone else entirely? She glanced around the diner, empty except for Doris in the kitchen. The cryptic message left her unsettled, but there was no time to dwell on it. The morning rush was about to begin. By midday, the diner was bustling. Clara's focus shifted to managing the tables, though a nagging unease persisted. It wasn't until a young boy came in holding a small package that her anxiety spiked again. "Are you Clara?" the boy asked, his voice timid. Clara crouched slightly to meet his eyes. "I am. Who gave this to you?" "A man outside," the boy said. "He told me to give it to you and not to open it until later." Before Clara could ask more, the boy darted out the door. She called after him, but he was already gone, lost in the crowd outside. She stared at the package, its plain brown wrapping offering no clues. Her hands trembled as she placed it under the counter, deciding to deal with it after her shift. Hours later, when the diner had emptied out, Clara finally retrieved the package. Carefully, she unwrapped it to find a simple black notebook. On its first page, written in the same bold handwriting as the note, were the words, "They're watching. Trust no one." Clara's was shocked. Flipping through the notebook, she found a series of dates, locations, and cryptic notes. Some of the dates matched events she remembered: the day her car's tire had mysteriously gone flat, the night she thought she'd seen someone lurking outside her apartment. Was someone stalking her? And if so, why? She sank into a chair, her heart pounding. The notebook felt like a warning, but it also left her with more questions than answers. Who was trying to protect her, and from what? The sound of a motorcycle engine interrupted her thoughts. Clara jumped, clutching the notebook. She peeked out the window to see Evelyn, the silver-haired biker, parking her bike. Evelyn entered, her expression unreadable. "We need to talk," Evelyn said without preamble. Clara hesitated but nodded, gesturing for Evelyn to sit. The older woman's eyes flicked to the notebook in Clara's hands. "Where did you get that?" "It was left for me," Clara said. "Do you know what it means?" Evelyn's jaw tightened. "I might. But first, you need to tell me everything that's happened recently." Every strange thing, no matter how small. As Clara recounted the events of the past few days, Evelyn listened intently, her expression growing darker. When Clara finished, Evelyn leaned back, her fingers drumming against the table. "I think someone's trying to scare you off," Evelyn said. "Maybe from this diner. Maybe from something bigger." Clara's stomach churned. Why would anyone do that? Evelyn's gaze softened, but there was a hardness behind it. Sometimes people don't need a good reason to hurt someone. They just do. But don't worry, kid. You're not facing this alone. Clara wanted to believe her, but the weight of the notebook in her hand said otherwise. The next day dawned bright and deceptively calm, a stark contrast to the storm brewing in Clara's life. She had barely slept, her mind tangled with questions about the cryptic notebook, the mysterious warnings, and the shadowy danger Evelyn had hinted at. As she arrived at the diner, a chill prickled her skin despite the warm sunshine. The weight of the unknown pressed heavily on her shoulders. The morning crowd shuffled in as usual, and Clara forced herself to focus on her tasks. She poured coffee, refilled condiments, and smiled at regulars, but her mind remained clouded. It wasn't until a quiet moment mid-morning that the next piece of the puzzle fell into place. A local mailman, Joe, walked in holding a small envelope. He waved her over with a cheerful grin, oblivious to her inner turmoil. "Got this for you, Clara. Dropped it off early this morning. Thought I'd bring it by in person since it says urgent," Joe said, handing her the envelope. Clara thanked him and tucked the envelope into her apron pocket, feeling a familiar twinge of unease. She waited until the rush subsided before retreating to the storeroom for a moment of privacy. Her hands trembled as she tore open the envelope. Inside was an old, yellowed piece of paper folded neatly in thirds. The handwriting was elegant but slightly shaky, as though penned by an aging hand. Clara recognized it instantly. It was her grandmother's. "Clara, my sweet girl. If you're reading this, it means I've left more behind than I ever intended. There are things I've kept hidden, not out of shame but out of necessity. The diner isn't just a place for weary travelers, it's a sanctuary. Over the years, I've helped people escape lives of pain and danger. Not everyone appreciated my efforts, and I've made enemies. They may come for you, thinking you know something or hold some secret. Be careful who you trust. If you ever feel unsafe, there's a key hidden under the third loose floorboard in the storeroom. It will open a box buried in the woods behind the diner. Inside you'll find answers, but they won't come without a price. Only open it if you're ready to face the truth. I love you, my darling girl. Stay strong. Grandma Rose." Clara clutched the letter to her chest, her breath coming in shallow gasps. Her grandmother had been a kind, gentle soul, or so she thought. The idea that Rose had been involved in something dangerous and clandestine was almost impossible to reconcile with the woman Clara had known. But the urgency in the letter was undeniable. After a few minutes to compose herself, Clara returned to her duties, but her mind was elsewhere. The key. The box. The woods. Her grandmother had left her a trail to follow, and the weight of the decision to pursue it gnawed at her. By the time the afternoon lull arrived, Clara couldn't wait any longer. She locked the storeroom door behind her and knelt on the floor, running her hands over the wooden planks. It took some time, but she finally found the third loose board. With some effort, she pried it up, revealing a small, tarnished brass key hidden beneath. She stared at it for a long moment, her heart pounding. The key felt heavy in her palm, both physically and metaphorically. Whatever it unlocked, Clara knew her life would never be the same after opening that box. That evening, after closing the diner, Clara ventured into the woods. The fading sunlight painted the trees in golden shadows, and the cool breeze carried a sense of foreboding. Following her grandmother's instructions, she walked about 50 paces from the back door of the diner until she found a small clearing. There, half buried beneath a layer of moss and leaves, was a rusted metal box. Clara brushed away the dirt and debris, her fingers trembling as she inserted the key. The lock clicked, and the lid creaked open. Inside was a collection of documents, photographs, and an old journal. She carefully lifted the journal first, its leather cover worn smooth with age. Opening it, she found pages filled with her grandmother's handwriting, recounting stories of people she had helped. Women fleeing abusive husbands, men escaping gang life, children whisked away from dangerous homes. Each story was detailed, vivid, and heartbreaking. One entry caught Clara's eye. October 12, 1984, they came again last night, asking questions about Maria. I told them I hadn't seen her, but they didn't believe me. I had to move her to the safe house sooner than planned. If they find out she's gone, they'll come after me. But I'd do it all over again. No one deserves to live in fear. As Clara read, she realized her grandmother had been more than a kind diner owner. She'd been a protector, a quiet hero who had risked her life to save others. But her actions had clearly left scars, both on her and those she had defied. At the bottom of the box, Clara found a sealed envelope addressed to the Watchers. Inside was a list of names and addresses, along with notes about their safety. Clara's stomach churned as she realized the significance. This was the information the people threatening her grandmother must have wanted. And now it was in Clara's hands. The sound of snapping twigs broke the silence, and Clara froze. She looked up, her heart racing, to see a figure stepping into the clearing. It was Evelyn, her silver hair glinting in the dim light. "You shouldn't be out here alone," Evelyn said, her voice calm but firm. "How did you know I'd be here?" Clara asked, clutching the box protectively. Evelyn gestured toward the woods. "We've been keeping an eye on you. Rose made us promise to protect her family if anything ever happened to her. When we saw you heading this way, we figured it was time to step in." "We?" Clara asked, confused. At that moment, more figures emerged from the trees, Evelyn's biker crew, their leather jackets and stern faces unmistakable. Clara felt a mix of relief and apprehension. "What is this?" she demanded. "Why are you all so involved in my life?" Evelyn stepped closer, her expression softening. "Because Rose saved us too. Every one of us. She gave us second chances when no one else would. We owe her everything. And now we owe you." Clara's grip on the box loosened as the weight of their words sank in. Her grandmother's legacy wasn't just one of sacrifice. It was one of loyalty and community, built on the lives she had touched. But as Evelyn looked down at the contents of the box, her face darkened. "If they know you have this, they'll come for you. We need to move fast." "Who are they?" Clara asked, her voice shaking. Evelyn hesitated before answering. "People who profit from pain and fear. People who won't stop until they get what they want." Clara looked at the documents, then back at the bikers. For the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. She wasn't alone in this fight. Whatever lay ahead, she had allies, unexpected guardians who would stand by her side. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the clearing into shadow, Clara knew one thing for certain: she was ready to face the truth. Clara followed Evelyn into the night, the roar of the older woman's motorcycle cutting through the silence. The diner faded behind them as they rode deeper into the countryside, where trees formed thick walls of shadow on either side of the road. After a few miles, Evelyn slowed, turning off onto a dirt path. Clara hesitated but kept her car close, the tension in her chest growing with every passing moment. When they arrived at a clearing, Clara saw the glow of a campfire ahead. Around it, the familiar figures of Evelyn's biker crew stood, their motorcycles parked in a loose circle. The firelight danced across their faces, giving them an almost ethereal presence. Despite their rough appearance, there was a certain calmness in the way they held themselves, a quiet confidence that made Clara feel both anxious and, strangely, safe. Evelyn parked her bike and motioned for Clara to join them. "Come on," she said. "They've been waiting." "For me?" Clara asked, gripping her steering wheel tightly. Evelyn nodded. "They all knew your grandmother. They owe her as much as I do. And now we owe you." Clara stepped out of her car, clutching the strap of her bag like a lifeline. As she approached the group, one of the bikers, a tall man with a deep scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. His leather jacket bore the name, Tank, stitched on the front. His gaze was intense but not unfriendly. "This her?" Tank asked, glancing at Evelyn. Evelyn nodded. "This is Clara, Rose's granddaughter." At the mention of her grandmother's name, a ripple seemed to pass through the group. Faces softened, and a few exchanged nods. Tank extended a hand to Clara, his grip firm but careful. "Your grandmother was a good woman," he said. "Saved my life once. If she trusted you, then so do we." Clara felt her throat tighten. She shook his hand, unsure of what to say. "Thank you," she managed. "I don't even know what's happening, but thank you." Evelyn placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "We're going to figure it out. But first, you need to know the truth about Rose, and about the people who are after you." The group settled around the fire, with Clara seated between Evelyn and a younger biker named Red, whose wild curls framed her freckled face. Tank cleared his throat and began to speak. "Rose wasn't just a diner owner," he said. "She was a lifeline for people who had nowhere else to go. She helped people escape abusive homes, gang life, and worse. She gave them new identities, safe places to start over. But not everyone appreciated what she was doing." Clara nodded, recalling the journal and letters she'd found. "I saw some of her notes," she said. "She mentioned people coming after her. She said they'd come after me too." Tank's expression darkened. "That's because the people she stood up to were powerful. Criminals, gang leaders. They didn't like losing control, and Rose made them lose a lot of it." Evelyn took over. "When she passed, we thought they'd let it go. She'd been gone long enough that we figured they'd moved on. But now it's clear they haven't. They must think you know something, or have something, they want." Clara's mind raced. "I don't know anything. I don't have anything." "You do now," Evelyn said, her gaze steady. "That notebook, the names and addresses. It's a trail leading back to the people she helped. If the wrong hands get a hold of it, those people could be in danger. And they'll come for you to get it." Clara felt a chill run through her. The weight of her grandmother's legacy pressed down on her shoulders. She had admired Rose's strength and compassion, but now she realized the cost of that kindness. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Red leaned forward, her tone brisk but reassuring. "You stick with us. No one's getting to you while we're around." Another biker, a wiry man with sharp eyes and the nickname Ace, spoke up. "We'll move you somewhere safe. You can't stay at the diner anymore. They'll be watching it." Clara's stomach dropped. "Leave the diner? But it's all I have." Evelyn squeezed her shoulder. "It's just a building, Clara. What matters is staying alive. We'll protect you, but you have to trust us." Clara hesitated, torn between fear and determination. She had no idea how to navigate this world of danger and deception, but the sincerity in the biker's eyes gave her hope. Finally, she nodded. "Okay. I trust you." The group didn't waste time. They divided into tasks. Some would gather supplies, while others scouted the roads for any signs of suspicious activity. Evelyn stayed close to Clara, guiding her through the plan. "We'll take you to one of our safe houses," Evelyn explained. "It's isolated and off the grid. You'll be able to breathe there." "Do you have these safe houses just lying around?" Clara asked, half joking. Evelyn smirked. "We've been around a long time, kid. You pick up a few things." As they prepared to leave, Tank handed Clara a helmet. "You're riding with me," he said. "Your car's too easy to track. We'll come back for it later." Clara hesitated but accepted the helmet, climbing onto the back of Tank's motorcycle. The engine roared to life, and she gripped his jacket tightly as they sped into the night. The other bikers followed, their headlights cutting through the darkness. They arrived at the safe house an hour later, a secluded cabin nestled deep in the woods. The air was crisp and quiet, the only sounds coming from the chirping of crickets and the rustling of leaves. Inside, the cabin was simple but well equipped, with enough food and supplies to last for weeks. "You'll be safe here," Evelyn said as they settled in. "But we need to talk about what's next." What do you mean? Clara asked. We can't just hide forever, Evelyn replied. If these people think you have something, they'll keep coming. We need to find out who they are and what they want, and then we take the fight to them. Clara's eyes widened. Take the fight to them? How? I'm not like you. You're stronger than you think, Evelyn said firmly. And you're not alone. We'll figure this out together. The bikers spent the rest of the night devising a plan. Clara listened intently, her fear gradually giving way to determination. For the first time, she felt like she had a chance, not just to survive, but to honor her grandmother's legacy. As dawn broke over the horizon, Clara stood by the cabin's window, watching the light filter through the trees. She was terrified of what lay ahead, but she wasn't running anymore. With the bikers by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. And for the first time in days, she felt a glimmer of hope. Inside the secluded cabin, the tension was palpable. Clara sat at a small wooden table, watching the bikers finalize their plans. Evelyn leaned over a map spread out across the table, her finger tracing the winding roads around the diner and the suspected locations of the Black Vulture's operations. Red was stationed by the laptop, her sharp eyes scanning for updates from their makeshift surveillance network. Tank, standing by the door, turned to address the group. They're going to come looking for us, but we're not sitting ducks. We've got the upper hand right now, and we're going to use it. What do you need me to do? Clara asked, her voice steady despite the unease roiling in her chest. Tank glanced at her and nodded approvingly. For now, stay put and let us handle the heavy lifting. If we can figure out who's calling the shots, we can cut the legs out from under them. Clara clenched her hands together. But what if they find this place? What if they come here? They'll have to get through us first, Evelyn said firmly, her tone leaving no room for doubt. This cabin is fortified, and we've got eyes on every approach. You're safe, Clara. I promise. Hours passed as the bikers worked tirelessly to prepare. Red and Ace pored over the notebook and cross-referenced the names with public records and known gang activity. It didn't take long for a pattern to emerge. Got something, Red announced, breaking the tense silence. A name keeps popping up, Marcos Vela. He's tied to several of the people Rose helped, and he's been connected to the Black Vultures for years. That's our guy, Evelyn said, her jaw tightening. What's he after? Revenge, maybe, Ace suggested. Or money. If Rose disrupted their operations, they might think Clara has something valuable. Evelyn turned to Tank. We need to take this guy out of play. Tank nodded. Agreed. Let's pay him a visit. The bikers decided to split into two groups. Tank, Evelyn, and Red would head to a warehouse suspected to be Marcos Vela's base of operations. Ace and two others would remain at the cabin to guard Clara and monitor the surveillance feeds. Before they left, Evelyn pulled Clara aside. We're going to end this, she said. But if anything happens while we're gone, you stick with Ace. He'll keep you safe. Clara nodded, her chest tightening with a mix of fear and gratitude. Be careful. Evelyn gave her a rare smile. Always am. The cabin felt eerily quiet after the others left. Clara sat near the surveillance monitor, watching the grainy feeds from the motion-activated cameras scattered around the property. Ace stood nearby, his hand resting on the hilt of a knife strapped to his belt. For a while, nothing happened. Then, the monitor flickered. One of the cameras had detected movement. We've got company, Ace said, his tone low and calm. He motioned for Clara to stay back as he signaled the others in the cabin. Two figures emerged on the feed, their faces partially obscured by hooded jackets. They moved cautiously, clearly trying to avoid detection, but the cameras had already captured their approach. Ace grabbed a radio and called Evelyn. We've got movement at the cabin. 2 hostiles east side. What's your status? Evelyn's voice crackled back. We're at the warehouse. Hold tight. Don't let them get inside. Ace motioned to the others, and the group sprang into action. One biker took a position by the window with a rifle, while another covered the back door. Clara stayed behind Ace, her heart pounding as the intruders drew closer. Suddenly, a loud crack shattered the stillness, a warning shot fired into the air. The intruders froze, their heads snapping toward the cabin. "You're surrounded!" Ace shouted, his voice carrying through the night. "Drop your weapons and walk away, or you'll regret it." For a moment, there was silence. Then, one of the intruders made a break for it, darting back into the woods. The other hesitated, then followed, disappearing into the shadows. Ace waited a few moments before relaxing his stance. "Cowards!" he muttered. Turning to Clara, he said, "See? They're all bark and no bite." Clara exhaled a shaky breath, her adrenaline still surging. "What if they come back with more people?" "They might," Ace admitted. "But we'll be ready." Meanwhile, at the warehouse, Evelyn, Tank, and Red moved with precision. The building was dimly lit, its exterior surrounded by abandoned vehicles and stacks of rusting metal. Inside, they could hear faint voices, Marcos Vela and his men. Evelyn signaled for the group to split up. Tank approached from the main entrance, creating a diversion, while Evelyn and Red slipped in through a side door. The plan was simple: corner Vela and force him to back off. The tension was thick as they navigated the cluttered interior. Finally, they found Vela in a makeshift office, surrounded by his lackeys. He was a wiry man with a sharp face and cold eyes, but his confidence faltered when Tank burst in, followed by Evelyn and Red. "Marcos Vela," Tank growled. "We need to talk." Vela's men reached for their weapons, but Evelyn raised her gun, her expression ice-cold. "Don't even think about it," she said. "We're not here to negotiate." Vela smirked, though his eyes betrayed his nerves. "You've got guts coming here. But you're in over your heads." Evelyn stepped closer, her tone deadly. "You're going to leave Clara alone. Whatever grudge you have, it dies here. If we see your people near her or the diner again, you won't get a second warning." Vela's smirk disappeared, replaced by a flicker of fear. He studied the bikers, weighing his options. Finally, he nodded. "Fine. She's not worth the trouble." "She never was," Tank said. "But you are. Remember that." With that, the bikers left, their message delivered. As they rode back to the cabin, Evelyn couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. They had bought Clara some time, and maybe even ended the threat altogether. Back at the cabin, Clara was waiting anxiously when the group returned. Evelyn gave her a reassuring nod as she stepped inside. "It's done," she said simply. Clara felt a wave of relief wash over her. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." Evelyn smiled faintly. "You're not out of the woods yet, kid. But we'll get you there." For the first time in days, Clara felt hope. Surrounded by her unexpected guardians, she knew she wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. The dawn broke gently over the cabin, painting the world in hues of soft gold. Clara stood at the window, clutching a steaming mug of coffee. Her reflection in the glass looked tired but resolved, a stark contrast to the woman she'd been just a week ago. The stillness of the woods wrapped around her, a cocoon of calm after the storm of events that had swept through her life. She heard the faint creak of floorboards behind her and turned to see Evelyn entering the room, holding a similar mug of coffee. "You're up early," Evelyn remarked, her voice warm. "Couldn't sleep," Clara admitted, a faint smile touching her lips. "Too much to process." Evelyn leaned against the counter, her silver hair catching the morning light. "That's understandable. You've been through a lot. But you've handled it better than most." Clara took a sip of her coffee, letting its warmth ground her. "I don't feel like I've handled anything. I've just been trying to keep up." Evelyn stepped closer, her expression soft but firm. "Sometimes surviving is the hardest thing to do. And you've done more than that, you've stood your ground. Your grandmother would be proud." The mention of Rose sent a pang of longing through Clara's chest, but it was tempered by pride. "I hope so. I never realized how much she carried, how much she sacrificed." Evelyn nodded. "Rose had a way of making everyone around her feel safe. She didn't do it for recognition, She did it because she believed it was the right thing to do. You have that same fire in you. The other bikers began filtering into the room as the morning progressed. Red plopped onto the worn couch, yawning dramatically. I can't believe we pulled this off, she said, stretching her arms. Marcos Vela's operation is officially in shambles, and the black vultures are scrambling to figure out what hit them. Good riddance, Tank rumbled as he entered, carrying a box of supplies. They won't be bothering Clara, or anyone else, anytime soon. Ace grinned from his spot by the surveillance setup. And we made sure of it. The message we sent was loud and clear. Clara couldn't help but smile as she looked around the room. These people had risked everything to protect her, a waitress they'd barely known. Their loyalty to her grandmother's memory and their willingness to stand by her in the face of danger filled her with gratitude. Thank you, she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. All of you. I don't think I'll ever be able to repay what you've done for me. Red waved a hand dismissively. We're not in it for payback, kid. This is what family does. Family? Clara asked, surprised. Evelyn stepped forward, her expression gentle. Your grandmother created more than a diner and a safe haven. She built a family. It's not about blood, it's about the people you choose to stand with. And we choose to stand with you. Over the next few days, life at the cabin settled into a quiet rhythm. The bikers took shifts monitoring the surrounding woods, ensuring no remnants of the black vultures would find their way back. Clara found herself helping with tasks around the cabin, preparing meals, organizing supplies, and even learning basic self-defense from Red, who was an enthusiastic and patient teacher. You've got a solid punch, Red said one afternoon after a quick training session. With some practice, you'll be able to knock someone flat. Clara laughed, wiping sweat from her brow. I'll settle for being able to defend myself. I'm not exactly looking for a fight. Red grinned. Good. But it's always better to be ready, just in case. By the end of the week, the bikers gathered for a final meeting in the cabin's main room. Evelyn stood at the center, her presence commanding as she addressed the group. We've done what we set out to do, she began. The immediate threat is gone, and Clara is safe. But we all know the work doesn't end here. Tank nodded. If anything else stirs up, we'll be ready. Evelyn turned to Clara. The choice is yours now. If you want to stay here a while longer, you're welcome. But if you're ready to go back to the diner and rebuild, we'll make sure you can do it safely. Clara considered her options. The cabin had become a refuge, a place where she'd felt protected and cared for. But the diner was her home, her grandmother's legacy, and she couldn't let fear keep her away forever. I want to go back, she said finally, her voice resolute. The diner is where I belong. It's where Rose's work started, and it's where I want to carry it forward. Evelyn smiled, a glint of pride in her eyes. Then we'll make it happen. 2 days later, Clara returned to Rosie's diner, escorted by Evelyn, Tank, and Red. The building stood just as she'd left it, a symbol of resilience against the chaos that had threatened to overtake her life. The bikers helped her clean and prepare the diner for reopening. The small act of restoring the space brought Clara a sense of peace, as if she were reclaiming a piece of herself. When the neon open sign flickered back to life, she felt a surge of pride. You're not alone, Clara, Evelyn said as they prepared to leave. If you ever need us, you know how to find us. Clara hugged her, the gesture heartfelt. Thank you for everything. Tank tipped his helmet, and Red offered a wink and a wave as they mounted their bikes. The roar of their engines faded into the distance, leaving Clara standing at the diner's door, ready to face whatever came next. The weeks that followed were marked by a quiet sense of triumph. Regulars returned to the diner, their laughter and chatter filling the space with warmth. Clara found herself telling stories of Rose to anyone who asked, ensuring her grandmother's legacy lived on. One evening, as she wiped down the counter, she noticed a folded piece of paper left by a customer. Opening it, she found a simple message. You're stronger than you know. Keep going. A friend. Clara smiled, tucking the note into her apron pocket. She didn't need to know who had left it, she already knew the truth it held. As the sun set outside, casting a warm glow over the diner, Clara felt a sense of peace. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. And with the support of her newfound family, she knew she could face anything the road ahead might bring.